Hello and welcome to Mr.EvilWakes. If you love scary stories to sleep to, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from in the world. Now, relax, close your eyes, and let the rain carry you into the darkness.
Story 1. Someone mailed me a sex doll that looks exactly like my dead wife. Call me delusional. Call me whatever you'd like. God knows I've heard it all, and from my own family and friends. The people I thought would always believe me have written me off as some kind of nutcase, fueled by grief to drag all of my loved ones into my own perverted delusions. And so I turn here, to a place where I have no one whose opinions of me I care about. No offense. Eleanor's funeral was a small event. It was less than what I would have chosen for her, but it was already more than what her family and I could afford combined, and I knew that she wouldn't have wanted any of us going completely bankrupt for her even in the event of her death. It sounds so ridiculous and maybe even cold to those who didn't know her, but the times when I hear her voice the most in my head are when dealing with my finances. Put those chips down. The lights in the convenience store would flicker, and I would swear she was with me, and my hands would shake, causing the bag of Doritos to crinkle, causing the clerk to squint his eyes at me from behind the counter. Jesus Christ, Diego, the electricity bill is already late, are you crazy? And then we would say it together, except my voice came out of my mouth and hers was only imaginary, and the clerk would look at me all crazy and she got away without embarrassment because she wasn't alive anymore and I was. Every dollar counts. Asterisk. Yeah, spare me the lecture, Ellie. Anyways. It was small, and after a gathering at the funeral home, closed casket, of course, it took place in her grandmother's backyard. It was catered by her favorite restaurant and we labeled it a celebration of life, and we all gathered around an unlit fire pit and told stories about her until her mother's crying was so loud even from the upstairs bedroom that her brother told us it was time for us all to go home. He was the only one who even really looked at me that entire night. As I was leaving he stopped me, grabbing my arm. Diego, he sighed, rubbing at his face with the hand that wasn't still holding onto me as if I was going to flee. Are you doing okay? I didn't know what to say to that. Was I okay? Did he mean in the grand scheme of things, or right this second? Was he asking if I was okay or if I was going to kill myself? I didn't know the answer to any of it. I had always hated that question, and right then it felt almost hilariously impossible to respond to. I blinked at him dumbly. Sure. He looked at me for a few seconds too long to be comfortable. I knew what he wanted to say. He wanted to say it's not your fault, Diego. He wanted to say, ignore our family. They're heartbroken, and they don't know what to think right now. I pulled my arm away, letting him off the hook. I'll see you around, I blanked. He nodded weakly. That was the sort of awkward interaction that previously probably would have haunted me for weeks. I would have paced in our bedroom that night, with Eleanor lying on the bed, trying to read through my anxious rambling and rolling her eyes at me. But right then, this time, it was gone from my head almost as soon as he was out of my field of vision. I didn't want to go home, so I drove around for a while. I avoided every spot that we used to go to. At every right turn we used to take I would turn left. At every intersection I fought the urge to close my eyes so I wouldn't picture her waiting on the corner after work, waving to me to pick her up. I ran a couple of stop signs, wanting to get out of every familiar neighborhood as quickly as possible. It didn't take long for me to realize it was no use. She was everywhere, she would always be everywhere. I just had to bite the bullet. The package didn't faze me at first. It looked unassuming, sitting on our doorstep, large and silent. I almost just shoved it aside to lumber through the front door so I could pass out on the couch and turn off my brain, but something stopped me. Her voice. Whose package is this? Is it yours, Diego? Asterisk. That was when I took pause, because it wasn't mine, or at least I didn't think it was. Like I said, Eleanor hadn't been strict necessarily, but she was always very financially conscious. A purchase that would have come in this size of a box would have at least been a conversation when she had been alive, and after she hadn't been anymore I hadn't exactly had the urge to shop online. I inspected it. It kind of felt like it was inspecting me back. I looked for a label, anything, any sign that it was meant for one of the neighbors, but there was nothing. It was just a large unmarked cardboard box, sealed shut with straight and clean lines of clear packing tape. I sighed, burdened by the idea of lugging it inside, but curiosity and that voice in my head won out in the end. I dropped the box in the living room and shuffled to the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the fridge and a pair of scissors. Popping the lid off the bottle with the blade, I slumped onto the couch, staring at it in animosity. In a way, I hated it for giving me something to care about, even in such a microscopic sense. I wanted to be asleep or dead or something in between, but now I was present and my eyes were still open because of this stupid cardboard box. I tore it open, scattering packing peanuts all across the carpet. Eleanor would have had a cow if she had been there. I smiled a little despite myself. My smile quickly dropped as the contents of the box began to reveal themselves beneath the styrofoam. At first I thought it was a mannequin. It wouldn't be that surprising, I guess, considering we lived right next door to a clothing boutique. I thought maybe there was a chance something they ordered for the store just got dropped off at the wrong place. But as I looked closer, forcing my vision to focus, my stomach sank. It was a sex doll. Clear as day. No mannequin had that kind of detail. The doll came in several different pieces, the long legs lying separate to the torso, which was separate to the head. The skin was a tan shade of olive, and her hair was long, dark brown and tangled. She wasn't skinny, which was the first thing I noticed that was strange, stranger than a hyper-realistic sex doll on my doorstep, I mean. She wasn't fat either, per se, but the shape of her body was nothing like the sex dolls I had seen before on the internet, not petite, not toned or even overly curvy either. Looking at her body felt familiar to me, like slipping on a sock or climbing into bed. Like something I had done thousands of times before. Then I saw her eyes. Brown eyes, with little flecks of copper. Permanently sad eyes, crinkled at the corners and downturned, with long swooping eyelashes. Her eyes. Eleanor. Before I could stop myself I reached out, I touched her face. The skin was soft and almost oily to the touch, but I only thought about that the next day. It wasn't the first thing I noticed. The first thing I noticed was that her skin was warm. I leapt backwards, the couch scraping loudly against the floorboards, yet another thing she would have scolded me for. The open, untouched beer landed on the cushions and tipped over, spilling everywhere. My breathing came shallow and ragged, and I grabbed at my chest as if my heart might stop. I felt like it might. That was her. My Eleanor. This doll was her, down to every tiny inconspicuous detail. Even down to the pores on her nose and the slight cleft in her upturned chin. Outside of the panic, I felt nothing. I wasn't capable. I could feel my brain shutting down. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear anything but the ringing in my ears. I sat there in silence for what felt like an hour, until I could convince my body to move, and at that time all I could think to do was drag myself to bed and fall asleep. So that was what I did. In the morning, the first thing I felt was rage. At first I wasn't even entirely sure why I was so angry, but it didn't take very long for it to come rushing back to me. The doll. I ripped open the box, dumping the contents out on the floor of the living room, fueled only by my blind fury. I shuffled aggressively through the packing peanuts, refusing to look at the doll more than I was physically forced to. I had to find something, some clue as to who had sent this to me, who would be so sick in the head that they thought this was a good idea for a joke. I had half a mind to call up her brother or one of her cousins who had always hated me and demand an answer, but I quickly decided against that. They would never let me see their family again, and they were all I had left of my wife. I didn't find anything but a slip of paper that fluttered out after I had completely torn through everything, with a simple message typed in the center. Customer support, and then a phone number. I dialed immediately. They picked up right on the third ring. Hello, this is customer support. How may I help you today? The voice was cheerful and practiced, recited. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had no plan other than to call, and now I was clamming up. Who are you? It was all I could think to say. The female voice on the other end of the line offered a polite laugh, not unkind but still corporate in nature. May I ask what it is that you're calling about? I swallowed hard, my eyes drifting over to the doll. My throat ached. It felt like I was coming down with something. I received, a doll. I didn't order it. I see. I heard typing on a keyboard, and I almost felt like I could see her nodding her head. Could you read me the serial number? Serial number. Should be right on the doll's head, right behind the ear. I shivered, my face crumpling. I slowly kneeled down, reaching out with trembling fingers to move her hair to the side. There was a serial number, black figures stamped into her fake skin. Right below that there was something else. I felt bile rise in the back of my throat. A little tattoo sat right behind the lobe of her ear, a small hibiscus flower. My hand flew to my own ear, touching the one that matched it. I hate this placement, I could hear her whine, as if she was saying it right next to me, a smile in her voice. They did me so wrong, Diego, why didn't you fight that guy for me? Why didn't you take him out to the parking lot? I didn't realize I was crying until I tried to speak again. Wah, what is this? Serial number. I wiped at my face, trying not to audibly sniffle. 20200715001-143. One moment please. I heard more typing, and then silence. When she spoke again, I couldn't tell if I was imagining it or if her tone had changed slightly. I see here that you were sent one of our sample models, Diego. We do have upgrades available if you're interested. I didn't catch that she had used my name. If I had, I definitely would have questioned it. What? Who sent it? I'm not at liberty to say, I'm sorry about that. Well, I'd like to return it. The anger was coming back with a vengeance, and I felt hot all over. I don't know who would think this was fucking funny, but it's not, and I don't know what kind of company would. Please don't raise your voice at me. She cut me off, her voice somehow even more sickly cheerful and corporate than before. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I would like to return it. Please. I would highly advise against that. Something about the way she said it, as well as the words themselves, made me feel violently uneasy. I stammered through a response, taken completely off guard. What do you mean? I don't want it, I would like to return it, what do you mean by that? If you have any other questions, we're always here, okay. Thank you for calling customer support today, I hope everything was to your satisfaction. She didn't wait for me to reply. The line went dead, leaving me holding my phone to my ear in a silent room, my jaw slack. I felt like I could feel the doll watching me. Like Eleanor, but not. Like Eleanor, but without a soul. I googled the customer support phone number. Nothing came up besides an address that was seemingly in the middle of nowhere, nowhere near where I lived. I hauled it into the closet in the spare room and closed the door. I wanted to drive it to the dump, or even just throw it back outside on the doorstep, but something stopped me. I knew it wasn't her, it was the furthest thing from her, actually, it was some sort of disgusting, evil joke. I didn't know if it was worse if someone commissioned it or if that company just sold dolls that looked exactly like my Eleanor already. Actually, I did know which was worse, never mind, but in a way, it was her. It looked like her, and when I moved it with my hands around her waist I was hit with an overwhelming wave of nausea. It felt just like it did the night she died. It felt just like holding her waist on the ground, her body slumped against me, what was left of her brain leaking out onto my shoulder, her skull all but eviscerated from that gunshot wound. The gun they still hadn't been able to find, with a trigger on it that was pulled by someone they also hadn't been able to identify. I tried to forget about it. But it was that very feeling that caused me to bring the doll back out of the closet and put the pieces together, moving slowly as if I was sleepwalking. Maybe I was. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I slept next to the doll that night. I didn't use it. I would be lying if I said the thought didn't cross my mind, but it felt too wrong, too horrible to consider more than as a passing thought. It wasn't Eleanor. It was some plastic imitation. But even so, sleeping with my arms around her like I never thought I would get to do again almost made me want to believe in a god. I dressed her in some of Eleanor's old pajamas and I fell asleep faster and more restfully than I had in weeks. It felt so real that when I woke up I went to kiss her on the cheek before I remembered. Her body was warm in mine, her skin slightly clammy like it would be on the real Eleanor right when she woke up, when she would pry my arms off of her with her nose scrunched up and mutter, "Ew, we're sweaty." I called my mom and I told her what had happened. I didn't give her all of the details, the thought too awkward if nothing else to elaborate, but I was pretty sure she got the picture. It was clear she didn't believe me. She asked a lot of questions, all of them along the lines of, "Are you sure you didn't order it and forget about it?" And, "Honey, are you feeling stable enough to be alone right now?" All of this was about a week ago. I've tried a few more times to tell people about this. I even talked to her brother, but no one seems to believe me. When I show them the doll, they change how they're talking to me, and they look at me with eyes that are full of disgust only thinly veiled by pity. I know I'm losing them now. They've stopped even pretending to humor me. I can't even blame them, because I can't even bring myself to get rid of her. She's all I have. I know this is embarrassing. I know you're all going to make fun of me for this, I just can't let her go. I can't do it, she just feels so real. I probably wouldn't be posting this, though, if it weren't for the email I got today from the funeral home. Something happened to Eleanor's body. They won't give me all of the details over email or over the phone, but they want me to come down right away, so I'm going to do that after I finish writing this down. But that isn't the worst part. Not by far. Last night I noticed that Eleanor is starting to smell. Story 2. My boss bought a taxidermied raccoon. Now he's a violent psychopath. I've been working at Frisky's, my boss Jeff's place, for about 5 years now. Frisky's has always been a bit grody. When they say a place is a dive, Frisky's is the low benchmark that other bars are diving towards. Recently, though, the crowd's gotten much rowdier, ruder, and a whole lot more obnoxious. The let's pretend we're dangerous vibe that Frisky's used to cultivate has given way to a genuine oh shit this place is actually dangerous vibe. Jeff's solution. He bought a taxidermied raccoon and put it on the high ledge over the liquor shelf. What the hell is that? I said. That, Jesse, is our new friend Roberto. Jeff was smiling. I'd been under the impression that he didn't know how to smile. And Roberto's a raccoon. You've got a very keen eye, he said. I see that Roberto the raccoon is dead. Another very astute observation. Okay, I said, maybe I'm being unclear about what my concern here is. Jeff, why did you put that dead raccoon up there? Jeff squinted his eyes and stared at Roberto the raccoon. I could see the gears turning. It's going to help with the shitbirds screwing up my bar. How, though? He took a beat to think about that. Then he said, I don't know how exactly. But it will. It told me it would. The stuffed raccoon told you. Jesus Christ. He was almost yelling. His face turned red and he waved his hands like a schizophrenic vagrant at a ghost. Quit being so nosy, Jess. Now it's my goddamn bar, and it's my goddamn raccoon, and I say it goes up there. No more questions. You got it. He picked up a bottle of Jack Daniels and threw it on the ground. An explosion of whiskey and glass shards launched into the air. I made the sound I imagined frightened pigs make. Jeff stared at me, his respiration heavy and ragged as a pneumonic old man's. I was afraid to move. Roberto stays, he said, his face quivering red. And then he stormed out into the parking lot. A few nights later we had a pretty good crowd of assholes, a biker gang. Or, a gang of men who were trying to represent themselves as a biker gang, meaning they likely did not have the bona fides of homemade Aryan nations tattoos and access to a functioning crystal methamphetamine laboratory. They were doing the thing bullies do where they, accidentally, bump their porky shoulders into people. They loudly yelled while looking around to make sure people could hear them loudly yelling. Their leader was a guy who I would have guessed worked at H&R Block, if not for his leather vest stitched with associational patches. H&R biker kept coming around the bar and trying to serve himself. You can't come back here, I said. And you guys need to chill, or I'm going to ask you to leave. Oh yeah, H&R biker said. He lifted his shirt, displaying the pistol tucked between his overhanging belly and his dungarees. I tightened my lips and said nothing. I do not like guns in the bar. Guns and booze are a bad mix. Their combined presence anticipates events like ATF raids, asset forfeiture, and condemnation proceedings. I walked away. A while later Jeff came out of the office. I guess he noticed something was wrong. He came up to me and placed his hand on my shoulder, which was unusual because Jeff was not a physically affectionate or even physically comfortable person. Jess, what's wrong? You seem troubled. I shook my head, avoiding eye contact while I wiped down the bar top. Nothing. Everything's fine. I wasn't very convincing, as you might guess. I can lie as well as the next gal, but not when I'm scared. One of the regulars, a body old skis with missing teeth, and untrimmed facial hair developing into an accidental handlebar mustache, whose name was Hank, leaned over the bar and told Jeff, one of those Hell's Angel wannabes has a piece. A gun. Yep, Hank said, nodding toward the guy who'd flashed me his pistol, the one who looks like the fat feller from Seinfeld. He's packing. I see, Jeff said. Let me think about what I should do. Que le grand retourne lever nous guy. Me and Hank traded glances. Both of us were probably confused by Jeff speaking what sounded like French, especially because he was a Freedom Fries guy. We watched him re-enter his office. What was that about? I said. Hank shrugged and sipped his beer before offering this philosophical gem. The French, a very strange race, they fight with their feet and fuck with their face. Jeff came almost right back out of the office, then around the counter and behind me. He climbed up on the back bar. I saw something shining silver in his hand. It was a needle. Jeff stuck the needle into Roberto the raccoon's chest and said, Grand retourne lever, donne le sagesse de ton sang. Then he stuck out his tongue and pushed the needle through the tip. Me and Hank looked at each other again, this time clear evidence of alarm on both of our faces, both of us completely flabbergasted. Jeff got down from the back bar. He removed the needle from his tongue and tucked it under the wristband of his watch. Blood dribbled down over his lips. It ran over his chin like a Halloween vampire mask. He approached H&R Biker and his henchmen at the table where they were sitting. H&R Biker looked up at Jeff. What the hell do you want? The speed and power of Jeff's violence stunned me. He shot his rigid palm from his side like a pneumatic nail gun rocketing out a nail, and smashed H&R Biker's nose flat into his face. The way the blood exploded from the guy's nose reminded me of stepping on a fast food ketchup packet. Before I could really understand what was happening, Jeff had pulled the man's gun from his waistband, cocked it, and then pressed the barrel against his forehead. Several of the other bikers reached for their waistbands, their backs, or their vests. Jeff discharged a round in the middle of the table before bringing it back to H&R Biker's skull. The first one of you to touch your guns gets your buddy plugged. You are desecrating the temple of Roberto. I am his apprentice. I warn thee, who would anger the great one who eats trash. The bikers looked at one another's faces. I think each Confederate was gauging whether their fellows were planning on making a move. But then Jeff started murmuring crazy whispers with the sound harshly clipped off at the end, the quiet babble of lunatics before they explode. I think they were afraid to even move. They must have been, I was, and Jeff was on my side. Jeff squeezed the pistol grip so tight that his suntanned fingers blanched white all the way through. After a minute, one of the bikers said, "We'll go. Just let us leave, and we'll get up and walk out. We're sorry about the trouble." A minor chorus of yes and okays were half-heartedly mumbled, indicating a majority vote. You can't desecrate his temple. Those who trespass before him will be piled upon the refuse of his dumpster and scattered by his nursery's great feast. Jeff waved the gun and screamed. Do you understand? We understand. Sir, we understand. I promise we understand, their spokesman said. Jeff seemed to be considering it. Finally, he dropped the gun down by his side. Then go, and may le grand retourne forgive you and bless your dreams with his omens. The bikers left. Jeff went into his office and sat down. I checked on him before I closed up for the night. He was asleep in his chair. Over the next few weeks, my boss's behavior changed, becoming more bizarre by the day. Once, when it was my shift to open the bar, I walked in and found him on his knees, facing Roberto the raccoon, bowing his head and speaking rapid-fire French. I thought of Abraham smashing his father's idols. The patriarch wouldn't have gone in for Jeff's heresies, that's for sure. But whatever Jeff was doing was working. The instigative patrons shaped up or shipped out, and the bar became a reasonably safe place again, while still maintaining a modestly rowdy reputation. But as Jeff reached each new, bizarre toll on his lunatic's turnpike, Frisky's customer base shrunk smaller and smaller until barely even our regulars showed. And that was before things even really got nuts. My phone woke me up. It was my day off and I had wanted to sleep late, but I was also expecting a birthday present from my aunt, and I had to keep an ear out for the delivery driver's call. I looked at my phone. It told me both that it was 4 in the morning and that Jeff was calling. I answered, "Yeah, Jess, I have something very important to show you. Can I pick you up?" I sat up in bed. "Jeff, well, what, do you know what time it is? I need to show you. It's very important that I show you. I'm waiting outside. Please, it sounded like he was about to cry. I need your help, Jess." Yeah, okay, just give me a minute. Let me get dressed. I watched the lightless green-black blur of the forest go by my window as Jeff drove us further out into the sticks. We'd been driving for an hour. The homesteads changed until they were all up long dirt drives and hidden behind trees, and soon after that there were no houses at all. I saw animals' eyes glowing yellow and red in the darkness of the woods, daylight still more than an hour away. Jeff hadn't spoken the entire drive, so I'd tried to sleep until we got there, wherever there was. But I kept hearing him whisper to himself, those whispers with words harshly clipped at their ends. He said, several times, *sacrifice le Holocaust sur untouched orders. I didn't know what the whole phrase meant, but it's never a good sign when someone suffering a nervous breakdown whispers the word, Holocaust. I couldn't imagine its meaning was very different in French. Thanks for coming out here with me, Jess. I just have something important to show you. Jeff nodded his head while he spoke, like he was a churchgoer affirming the truth of a testimony. Yeah, no problem. I've kind of been, I stopped myself. Jeff turned his head to look at me while he drove. What is it? You can tell me. I turned to face him, too. I couldn't believe it, I thought I might cry. I've been really worried about you. I nervously laughed through my clogged nose, wiping the corner of my eye, really worried about you. I looked into his eyes, waiting. I jumped in my seat when he started laughing. And it was weird, forced laughter. And it got louder and louder, until it was wild, unhinged, laughter that had no connection to humor. He suddenly just clamped down on it, the sound of someone closing a door on a loud laugh-tracked sitcom. That's crazy, Jess. That's really a crazy thing to say. I'm doing so good. I'm doing the best I've ever been. He whipped the steering wheel suddenly to the right. I screamed. He didn't even respond to me screaming. Jeff, where are we going? You're starting to scare me. Well, we're here now. You'll see right now. You'll see. He pulled off on a dirt road. After a minute, he stopped the car in a clearing inside a dense circle of pines. Here we are. It took me a minute to understand what the car's headlights were illuminating. Maybe because they were familiar physical phenomena and objects, but in places where I'd never seen them before. And like sliding the last puzzle piece into place, it became clear. There was a shovel and a big dirt hole, a tarp and bungee cords right beside the freshly dug. It was a grave. Jeff, my speech was interrupted by blunt force trauma. I felt a distant pain and saw a bright flash of light. I'd been hit so hard that he'd knocked me out with the first punch. I came to, and it seemed like only seconds later. Jeff was dragging me by my legs toward the unmarked grave. I screamed and I kicked at his hands. He grabbed me by my ponytail and whipped me forward. He tore hair from my scalp. He was so much stronger than he looked. It caught me unaware and he seized on my shock. I felt his work boots slam into my ribs, heard the crunching sound and shooting pain when they broke. Jess, don't make this harder than it has to be. Roberto has chosen you. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. My broken ribs meant I was incapacitated. Every breath was agony. I cried even though it hurt something awful to let myself cry, even if I kept quiet and didn't move while I did. I watched him walk back to his still idling car and open the trunk before taking something out of it. He walked back over next to me, and I saw he was holding the taxidermied raccoon. He placed it right next to my head, then bent down close and whispered to me, "This is a great honor for you." I heard him sniffling. "It's a shame he chose you, but it's also a great honor. You're going to go to Paradis des Ratons Lavers. You'll see. You'll get an entire new life, resurrected as one of Roberto's very own. And you'll have all the trash you could ever eat, Jess. There'll be no more pain. There'll just be overflowing dumpsters and a new ring-tailed family to keep you in their gaze. You'll see. You'll." "Jeff." I heard someone yell. I recognized that voice. How did I know that voice? "Let her go," the voice said, and I heard the sound of a shotgun cocked. I managed to turn my head. It was Hank. He was flanked on all sides by almost a half-dozen coonhounds, a treeing Walker coonhound, a few redbones, 2 blue-tick coonhounds, 2. Jeff hissed. "L'ennemi juré infernal." "Jessica," Hank said, "can you drive that car?" I croaked, hardly able to speak. "I don't think I can." Hank was quiet for a short moment. "Well," he then said, "you're going to have to." Hank whistled. It was loud and sharp, an expert's taxi hail. "Louis," he said, looking at one of the blue-tick hounds, who responded by stiffening his body from his snout to the tip of his tail, Emin la voiture. Louis the blue-ticked coonhound came and dipped his neck low next to me. He nudged my arms with his nose. I understood. I wrapped my arms around his neck. It was unbearable pain, but I understood the only other option was to stay here. And I didn't want to see what happened next. Hank kept his shotgun trained on Jeff as I completed the excruciating and tree-sap slow process of getting in the driver's seat of Jeff's car. "Launterer!" Hank shouted, and the other 5 coonhounds surrounded Jeff and the taxidermied raccoon. Then, Hank backed up to the car, keeping the shotgun barrel level with Jeff's head. He knocked on the window and I rolled it down. "Hank, I don't think I can drive," I said. "You ain't got a choice now, kid. 'Cause I got business to take care of, and you can't be here to see it." I looked over at Jeff. "What are you going to do with him?" He looked at me, sucked his teeth and looked over his shoulder. He used his hand to signal directions as he spoke. "You drive out the way you came in. When you come to the main road, go left. It's gonna take you longer, but keep on that road all the way until you see signs for the parkway. Take the parkway south. You'll be back in town inside of an hour. I'll come find you." "What are you going to do, Hank?" "Goodbye, Jessica. Go now. Go." Maneuvering the car with my broken ribs hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt. But I managed to make it all the way home without crying. When I got to my parking lot, though, I broke down. And even though the pain was incredible, or maybe because it was, I bawled my eyes out. Story 3. There's something my girlfriend doesn't want me to see. Cassie and I have been dating for 5 months. Only lately has it occurred to me, I can't recall a single time we've spent time together during the day. We met on Hinge. Her profile picture had her crouched outside a stone church, after what looked like a night out drinking. Her skin was porcelain white, and she had sharp, cat-like eyes that seemed to stare straight through the screen. I'd started hundreds of chats that went nowhere, so when Cassie asked if I wanted to go to dinner, I said yes without hesitation. We met at a bar and quickly acquainted ourselves with the liquor menu. Her smile widened with each glass of champagne. I ordered crab ragout, she ordered a large ribeye. Cassie was a self-certified carnivore and had red meat for almost every meal. The steak was cooked on the rare side of medium rare, and when she sawed into it, fat spots of blood sweated onto her plate. It spread until the whole plate was pink. She dragged a forkful of mashed potato through it like she was painting. Then she licked each tine clean, individually. It made me queasy to watch. I'd even asked her if she wanted me to send it back to the kitchen for a few more minutes on the grill, but she told me not to worry. She preferred it that way. After that first dinner, there were many more as we tried different restaurants around the city. Her shift work was from morning to evening, and she seemed to work every day, so we'd meet at night mostly out of convenience. Looking back, I can't remember her ever talking about what she actually does at work. Some nights, when we were out late, she'd stay at mine. I always sleep with the blinds open as I like waking to the sunlight. But when Cassie stayed, I'd wake up in the dark with my 6 o'clock alarm clock screaming at me from the side table. The blinds would be cinched together with safety pins. When I asked her about it, she just scolded me. "Do you have any idea how much it hurts?" Where the sun touched her, a thin strip down her left cheek, the skin was red like sunburn. Outside of that, it was almost perfect. I never noticed how strange things were until she moved in with me. It wasn't a permanent change. Cassie's apartment was built below ground level, and after days of heavy rain, water started seeping through the concrete flooring. The whole building smelled like wet cardboard. I did the gentlemanly thing and offered her a place to stay while the damages were repaired. I thought she'd jump at the chance, a trial run for what I hoped would end with us living together, but she just looked nervous, like she was searching for an excuse. All she did was politely shake her head with a "mmHmm." There were no drastic changes at first. As always, I'd leave for work while Cassie was still stretched out in bed, and I'd come home at night to find her cooking steak, sausages, or pork chops. She usually had me do the shopping, but occasionally she'd make late-night food runs to the grocery store and come back with a bag of something like ground beef. I never really thought about what she did while I wasn't in the apartment. I trusted her enough to know she wasn't going to rob me or snoop through my stuff. It wasn't until I remembered the cameras. I'd set them up years ago for my cat, Oscar, so I could record him climbing the cat tower and post a montage of the clips on TikTok. Oscar had suddenly run away a few months back, but the cameras were still there. I just hadn't checked them. So, on my lunch break, I logged into the app and tried connecting to the bedroom cam. It still worked, and there she was. Cassie. Dead asleep. I remember her specifically telling me how busy she was going to be at work that day due to a new project she'd been saddled with. I skimmed the footage back and for hours she lay so still I couldn't tell if she was breathing. The bedroom cam caught a glimpse of the street, and I could see cars passing by, so I knew it wasn't frozen. Cassie hadn't mentioned anything about taking a day off. With how much she worked, she'd made it sound like the whole place would collapse without her. When I got home, I asked how her day was and all I got was, fine. Throughout the rest of the week, I kept checking the cameras. Just here and there, to see if she ever left the apartment or even got out of bed. But no, she literally never left. Every day, she didn't move until 5 p.m., just as it was getting dark. She'd pull back the covers, stiffly rise, and then head to the kitchen to start cooking our dinner. She isn't freeloading, she has been paying for all my groceries as a thank you for letting her crash here. Maybe she's rich. Maybe she's won the lottery. Maybe she just doesn't trust me enough yet to explain. Last night, I accidentally grabbed a plant-based burger patty instead of the real thing. She sniffed it once, then slid the plate back toward me, saying she wasn't hungry. Hours later, I woke to the sound of the mattress shifting and then the fridge door sucking open. After a moment, the door clicked shut, and I heard the slow crinkle of plastic. That's when I realized she was elbow deep in the bin, digging for the leftover meat I'd thrown away days ago. She hasn't mentioned a word of this to me. Whenever I try to ask her about it, she shifts the conversation to a completely different topic. All I want to ask her is, why I can smell the scraps of meat she missed in the trash, and why does the thought of sucking them clean makes my mouth water. Story 4. Mind the gap. Do you know what a Foley artist is? When you're watching a TV show or a movie and you hear a character open a door, hit a light switch, slam a glass down on a table, plunge a knife into another person, etc., you're hearing the work of a Foley artist. They recreate the desired sounds for a scene and insert them into the soundtrack during the editing process. Very little of what you hear while watching film or TV was recorded at the same time as what you're seeing, most of it is added after the fact. If you ever want to take yourself out of a show or movie, focus in on the little sounds that you would usually take for granted. Suddenly they will begin to sound very blatantly artificial. I'm not someone who would usually notice stuff like that. I wouldn't call myself a film buff, and I've never worked in the entertainment industry, but I do enjoy a good cheesy sitcom now and again. When I saw that the new show, Mind the Gap, was made available on streaming last week, it looked right up my alley. I had no intention of analyzing the sound work for the show then, and now I wish that I had just skipped it and watched Friends again for the 100th time. I got home from work at around 8 o'clock last Wednesday. I kicked my shoes off, made myself a quick and dirty struggle meal, then plopped down on the couch in front of the TV. The first episode of Mind the Gap was queued up and ready to go, and as I pressed play I took a scoop of the food in my bowl. The metal spoon scraped against the edge of the ceramic, making a sound that would have annoyed my girlfriend Lauren if she had been there when it happened. I missed her a lot. The episode began with a silly theme song and then got right into the characters making stupid jokes in their apartment. It was so cliché that it even had a laugh track, but I enjoyed that kind of thing. It was nostalgic to me, and even comforting in a way. I was enjoying myself quite a bit, until about 10 minutes into the episode. That was when I noticed something that tore all of those feelings away from me and replaced them with paranoia and creeping dread. One of the characters, Dave, was eating cereal out of a bowl while his friend Bob was monologuing about some dumb idea for an invention that he had come up with. What disturbed me was that when Dave put his spoon into his bowl, it made the exact sound that my spoon had made in my bowl. I know that this sounds ridiculous, but it was the exact same sound, I was certain. I paused the show for a moment, thought about how strange it was that the sounds were seemingly identical, then quickly collected myself. I convinced myself that I must just be tired, that the sounds weren't really exactly the same, that would be impossible. After all, how different could the sounds of two different spoons scraping against two different bowls really be? They were sure to sound at least somewhat alike. I shook off that uneasy feeling and pressed play again. Then, a character named Sarah opened the door of the apartment and walked into the room with Bob and Dave. I paused the show again and stood straight up. The sound of the door, and the sound of the footsteps on the floor, were precisely the same as the sound of my apartment door and my footsteps when I walked through the entrance. I walked over to my door, opened it, then shut it. The sound was exactly the same. My hands were trembling as I picked up my shoes to put them back on my feet. I walked outside the door, shut it, opened it, and walked through the entrance as I had just an hour or so before. The sounds were completely identical to what I had heard in the show, down to the wavelength. It wasn't possible, but I was sure of what I'd heard. I felt a pang of terror and decided that I had better call it an early night and go to bed before I could think about it any further, and so I did. Before I went to sleep, I texted Lauren with shaking hands, asking how she was doing and how long it was going to be until she came home. She was studying abroad for the summer and I hadn't seen her in 2 months. She replied with a voice message, "I'm going to be staying here for a while. I got a job voice acting, can you believe it? They say I've got a real knack for it. We can talk about it later." I couldn't believe it. When was I going to see her again? Why wouldn't she talk to me about this first? This was all just too much for me, so I decided to put my phone down and I tried to get some well-needed rest. When I got home from work again the next day, I repeated the same routine and started, mind the gap, from where I had left off. I laughed to myself a little when I thought about the night before. What had I been thinking? So what if the sounds were similar to my own apartment? It was just a TV show. Maybe the people who made the sound effects lived in an apartment very similar to mine, and used utensils and bowls like the ones that one owned. So what? Then all of the feelings from the previous night came rushing back, as I became disturbed again at a scene toward the end of the episode. Dave was sleeping soundly in bed, and his alarm clock started playing a song off of the radio to wake him up. There was nothing unusual about this on its face, but the song choice made me shudder. It was the end of the second chorus of Black Hole Sun, leading into the bridge, which was exactly what my alarm clock had played to wake me up that morning. What were the odds? All of this seemed too much to be coincidence, but what could it mean? Although I was getting frightened again, I persevered and let the second episode begin when the first ended. What came next was truly unbelievable. I know that up until now you probably think that I'm just going crazy, but how could you explain this? It was a scene where a yet unseen character named Emily, Bob's ex-wife, left a voicemail message for him on his phone. Emily said in Lauren's voice, exactly how she had said it to me in her voice message, "I'm going to be staying here for a while. I got a job voice acting, can you believe it? They say I've got a real knack for it. We can talk about it later." It was the exact same line of dialogue, only coming out of my TV instead of my phone. What was going on? How was this possible? Horror took hold of me, then rage. What else could be going on, except that there were microphones in my apartment recording all of the sounds in the place. They must have recorded my bowl, my door, my footsteps, and even my girlfriend's voice message without my knowledge or consent. This was an unprecedented invasion of privacy, and I wasn't going to let it stand for 1 minute longer. I rose up and dashed around my apartment, throwing furniture around and tearing at the walls with a hammer. It was just as I suspected. There were small electronic devices concealed behind appliances and in small cracks in the walls and ceiling that I had never thought to examine closely before. I swung my hammer hard and tore apart the place for the better part of 6 hours, leaving no stone unturned in my search. I tore the devices from their wiring, and they emitted a screeching feedback noise until I smashed them to pieces. There were dozens of them, everywhere. You want to record my life and put it in a TV show? I'll show you. The sounds of my home and my life are not something to be repurposed for some idiotic sitcom. I am a real human being who is entitled to his privacy. At last, when my apartment was barely more than rubble and every last device had been utterly destroyed, I slumped back into the couch, triumphant. I was covered in perspiration and breathing very heavily. Then I realized something. I couldn't actually hear myself breathe. I couldn't hear anything. I beat my hands against the couch cushions, but it made no sound. I got up and walked around, but I heard no footsteps. Had I gone deaf? I grabbed the TV remote and pressed play to see if I could hear the show, and I could. How is it that I couldn't hear the sounds of my actual life, but I could hear the TV? In the show, Bob played another voicemail from his phone. It was Lauren's voice again, as Emily, saying this: "Did you think that they were microphones? No, silly. They were speakers. I can't hear anything but my phone and the TV now. Nothing I do in real life produces any noise, no matter how hard I try. I haven't left my apartment since then. What if I still can't hear anything when I step outside?" Story 5. Every night when I fall asleep, I die. It started without warning. No trauma or sickness. No bargain struck in a desperate moment. One night, I simply closed my eyes in bed and woke somewhere that wasn't my room. Since then, it has happened every single night. I don't dream anymore. Sleep isn't a slow drift into warmth or a dark embrace. It's a violent extraction. The moment my head sinks into the pillow, I feel it. Something inside me tears free, like my bones are being wrenched from my flesh but without the mercy of unconsciousness. My chest convulses as though someone is reaching in and scooping out everything that makes me me. There's a sound that comes with it too, but it's not a sound you hear with your ears. It's a tearing scream that comes from inside your skull. My whole body is left behind in bed, still and useless, while whatever is left of my mind gets pulled into the dark. That's where I see him. Death. At least, that's who I assume he is. No other explanation would make sense. He is shaped like a man, but he's too tall. His head always bends forward slightly, as if the ceiling of the world itself is pressing down on him. His body isn't shadow. It's the absence of anything alive or warm. Looking at him feels like looking into the moment before the universe was born. His form ripples and shifts with things I can't describe without sounding insane. There are swirls of smoke that move like galaxies, sparks like newborn stars flashing into existence before dying in cold silence. The edges of him blur and sharpen in a rhythm I can't follow, like he is both here and somewhere infinitely far away. He doesn't speak. He just walks. And I have no choice but to follow. The place he leads me to is never the same. Sometimes it's a ruined city where the wind carries voices I almost recognize. Sometimes it's an endless plain of bone-white dust beneath a black sky. Sometimes it's somewhere worse, somewhere that feels like it's looking back at me. I remember every single one of them, writing them all down. But the following entries I've written down are the ones that mattered most. I'll number them by which night it was in order. How many times I've walked in purgatory with death. 1. The first time it happened, I didn't understand where I was. I thought I was in a dream if not for the crystal clearness of everything I was experiencing. I woke standing on something that looked like glass. Not smooth glass, but thick panes that had cracked in jagged webs. Through the gaps beneath my feet, I could see what looked like an ocean turned upside down, suspended above nothing. It churned without sound. Waves rolled over one another and then folded inward into spirals that sank into black holes. Every so often, something moved beneath the water. I only caught glimpses, but they were large enough to darken entire stretches of the sea at once. Death stood beside me. He was watching the horizon, though there was no sun, no moon, and no sky. Just a band of pale light in the distance, like dawn frozen in place. "Where are we?" I asked. He didn't answer. The glass stretched endlessly in all directions, broken by holes where entire sections had fallen away into the void. Far off, I saw the twisted remains of buildings balanced at impossible angles. Some leaned so far they seemed on the verge of falling into the abyss, yet they never moved. We started walking. My footsteps made no sound, but the glass trembled faintly under my weight. Death never looked at me. "What is this place?" I asked again. "What's happening to me?" This time he slowly raised his arm and pointed toward the horizon. I didn't see anything there but that pale strip of light, yet the moment he pointed, a cold pressure began to build in my skull. After a long stretch of walking, I noticed shapes moving at the edges of the broken glass paths. At first I thought they were people, but they were too thin. Their bodies swayed like they were made of cloth filled with water. They had faces, but not the way humans do. Their eyes were just pits, their mouths narrow slits that didn't open. None of them made a sound. One came close enough for me to see its skin. It was translucent, like the thin membrane of an egg. Something writhed beneath it, pressing out against the surface as if it was trying to escape. "What are those?" I whispered. He didn't respond. He didn't even look. He just kept walking, and I had no choice but to follow. We reached the edge of the glass path where it broke into shards. Below was nothing but the upside-down ocean, stretching into forever. Death stopped there. He didn't point this time. He just stood, looking down, and I felt something in my chest begin to pull. The pressure grew until I couldn't breathe, and then, just like that, I was back in my bed. It was morning. My body was drenched in sweat. But the taste in my mouth was the strangest part. Salt water. 3. I woke standing on a road the color of burnt bone. The dirt was fine and dry, yet it seemed to cling to itself in a way that reminded me of ash mixed with oil. When I shifted my feet, it did not scatter like normal soil. Instead, it crumbled apart in sticky, slow-moving clumps, almost reluctant to be disturbed. The air was heavy. Not just thick, but oppressive, as if something unseen was pressing down on my lungs and ribs. Each breath felt like drawing in lukewarm water that left a faint metallic taste on my tongue. It was quiet here, so quiet that I could hear the faint grind of my teeth when I clenched my jaw. The road stretched ahead and behind in a perfectly straight line, dividing an endless expanse of black grass. The blades were long and thin, swaying even though the air around them was completely still. They shimmered faintly, as if absorbing the faintest glimmers of light from somewhere I could not see. When I looked closely, I thought I saw tiny motes drifting upward from their tips, vanishing before they reached my knees. Above was a sky that made my head ache. At first glance it was dark, but not the kind of darkness you get from night. It was deep, layered, constantly folding in on itself. Shapes formed in that shifting void, swirling spirals, jagged arcs, patterns like constellations that almost made sense before collapsing into something alien. The folds of the sky moved in slow, deliberate motions, like the world above me was a living thing breathing in long intervals. Sometimes the stars that flickered between those folds appeared to be arranged in human shapes, sometimes in geometric patterns, and sometimes in things I did not have words for. The longer I stared, the more I felt my thoughts slipping sideways. Death walked ahead of me, his form swallowing every bit of light from the road. The absence that made up his body seemed to drink in the sky's shifting light, making the galaxies inside him burn brighter for brief moments before winking out. He did not look back, but I could feel the pull of his presence guiding me forward. We had been walking for what felt like hours when I saw them. Off to the right, far from the road, stood a lone tree. Its branches were bone-white and bare, each one curling upward in a way that made it look like a frozen scream. Beneath it huddled a group of figures. They were moving, but not toward us. Even from a distance I could tell something was wrong. Their bodies were red and wet, strips of flesh hanging loose like clothing torn to shreds. Their faces were exposed muscle and sinew, and they clawed at themselves with hands slick with blood. Each motion tore more of their own tissue away. They made no screams, only low, constant moans that seemed to sink into the air like smoke into cloth. I stopped in the road and stared. "What are they?" I asked. Death did not respond. One of the figures lurched, its head twisting unnaturally far in my direction. There were no eyes, just dark, hollow sockets that glistened faintly. The mouth opened and shut, but the moaning did not match the movement. It was as if the sound was leaking from the air itself. Something pulled at me. Not physically, but in a way that made my chest feel tight, as though the tree itself was drawing me toward it. Without realizing it, I stepped off the dirt road, my foot sinking slightly into the black grass. The second my shoe touched the blades, an arm like a wall of darkness moved in front of me. I froze. "Why?" I asked. Death turned his head toward me, his gaze sinking into my mind like a cold current. His voice, when it came, was low and hollow, vibrating through my bones rather than my ears. "They are not for you." I looked back toward the tree. The flayed figures had stopped clawing themselves and now stood still, all of them facing me. Even without eyes, I could feel them watching. The black grass seemed to twitch beneath my feet. I wanted to ask more, but the pressure began building in my chest again, sudden, sharp, and inescapable. The tree, the grass, the figures blurred into one smudge of black and red as my vision tunneled. Then I was in my bed. My sheets were damp with sweat. When I swallowed, my throat burned as if I had been screaming for hours. I think I had been. 7. This time, I woke standing in water. It was shallow, only a few inches deep, but it stretched forever in every direction. The surface was perfectly smooth, and every step I took sent ripples racing outward until they faded into the horizon. There was no wind, no sound of waves, just the constant, delicate slap of water against my ankles as I moved. The ground beneath was solid, but I could not see it through the endless, mirrored expanse. Above me was an ocean. Not clouds, not a sky, but an actual ocean suspended overhead. The water churned and twisted far above my head, lit by shifting streaks of sunlight that seemed to come from nowhere. I could see shapes moving in that vast ceiling of water. Some were long, gliding in serpentine motions, their bodies too large to measure. Others drifted lazily, their bodies bulbous and fringed with translucent tendrils that pulsed faintly like they were breathing. Now and then, something enormous would pass overhead and block out all the light for a moment, and I would see only a silhouette so strange I could not begin to put words to it. Death was beside me, walking through the shallow water without leaving any ripples at all. "Why is this happening to me?" I asked him. He didn't answer. His head tilted slightly toward the distance, but he kept moving. I tried again. "If you're not going to tell me, then I guess I'll just talk to myself." And I did. I talked about how many nights it had been. How my waking hours were starting to feel more like the dream. How I'd stopped telling anyone about my nights because no one could understand. I talked about the places he'd taken me, the things I'd seen, and the growing suspicion that there was a reason for all of it. My voice felt too loud in the stillness, and yet death didn't seem to mind. We walked like that for what felt like hours. The water was cold, but it never got any deeper. The horizon never changed. The creatures above us swam on, unaware or uncaring that we were beneath them. Then I saw something on the horizon. At first it looked like a dark smudge moving slowly toward us. As it grew closer, I realized it was a ship. A massive, weather-beaten galleon, the kind I'd only seen in history books, floating upside down in the ocean above us. No, not upside down. The water didn't have an up or down. It just was. The ship was from another time, its wood blackened and rotting, its sails torn into long, fluttering ribbons. Large sections of its hull were missing, exposing broken ribs of timber. It should have been sinking, but instead it glided forward like it was caught on an unseen current. I thought at first it was dragging a normal anchor. It wasn't. Beneath it, tethered to a massive chain of rusted iron links, was a cluster of human bodies. Dozens of them, maybe more. They were alive, their chests rising and falling in slow, labored breaths. Each one was bound to the chain by their necks, their wrists, their ankles, so tightly that the iron had cut deep into their flesh. Their skin was pale and waterlogged, their eyes open but empty, gazing at nothing as they were pulled along. The chain dragged them across the shallow water, scraping their bodies over whatever lay beneath. I could see some of them twitch when they hit something sharp, but none of them screamed. The ship passed directly overhead, the chain rattling faintly as it went on. It did not speed up. It did not slow down. We stood there and watched it move past us, the trail of bodies stretching behind like a grotesque comet tail. I don't know how long we watched it. It might still be moving somewhere out there, dragging those bodies until there's nothing left of them to drag. Death turned and kept walking, and I followed. I didn't talk anymore after that. 13. Something is wrong with me. It's been creeping in over the last week, but today was the worst. I've been tired before, long shifts, bad sleep, but this is different. My body feels hollow, like I've been hollowed out with a dull spoon. My legs shake when I stand too long. My hands cramp when I try to write. I barely made it halfway through work today before my boss stopped me in the hallway. She didn't even ask if I was okay. She just said I looked pale and sick, and that I should go home before I dropped dead in the lobby. I've had 3 nosebleeds in the past 2 days. I almost never get them, maybe once every few years. The last one came out of nowhere while I was making coffee, and the taste of iron wouldn't leave my mouth for hours. I'm starting to wonder if these nights with death are bleeding into the days. If some part of me is actually dying, piece by piece. When I fell asleep tonight, the pull came faster than usual. The place I woke in was open. Not like a field, not like a plain, but an expanse so vast that I couldn't even tell where the ground ended and the horizon began. The surface beneath my feet was black stone, fractured in spiderweb patterns, each crack faintly glowing with dim blue light. Above us, the sky was filled with slow-moving clouds that glowed from within, like storm fronts lit by distant lightning. Death stood a few steps ahead, already walking. I caught up to him quickly. Is there a reason you keep showing me all of this? I asked. He didn't look at me, but he nodded once. That answer was worse than silence. It confirmed something I'd been afraid to admit to myself. There is a purpose. What is it then? I pressed. Why me? Why these places? What am I supposed to do with any of this? His head turned slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was the low rumble of distant thunder. It is not yet time for you to know. The heat in my chest was sudden. I was tired of waking in strange worlds, tired of walking without answers, tired of feeling weaker each day. Of course it's not time, I muttered, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. It's never time, is it? He didn't reply. I stopped asking questions. We walked on in silence for the rest of the night. The cracks in the stone seemed to pulse faintly with each step we took, like the ground itself had a heartbeat. Somewhere far off, I could hear what sounded like water dripping into an endless pit. When the pressure in my chest returned, I let it take me without fighting it. Back in my bed, my nose was bleeding again. 19. My body is failing me faster than I can keep track of. I am exhausted all the time. My legs feel like they might buckle under the smallest weight. My hands cramp just lifting a pen. My vision flickers, and sometimes I see things that I know aren't there, yet they feel solid. I could have sworn the mailman was missing his eyes today, standing at my doorstep with nothing behind his lids. The worlds I walk through at night are seeping into my days. Shadows move across the walls where there should be none. Faces appear in reflections, and I catch them only for a moment before they vanish. My nosebleeds have become relentless, coming every couple of hours, each one leaving the taste of iron thick in my mouth. I went to bed tonight determined to confront death. I refused to move until he answered some questions. We arrived in the blackened plains without sound, but this time he did not walk. For the first time, he stopped, standing motionless and waiting. I could feel the pull of the landscape, but I did not move. Why are you showing me all of this? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. His head tilted toward me. When he spoke, the words were slow, deliberate, and impossibly calm. To prepare you. I frowned, pressing further. For what? He said nothing. He only stood there, impossibly still, his form swallowing light around him. The answer was implied, clear, and yet I dared not say it aloud. I swallowed hard and tried another question. Why is my body getting worse in the real world? Why am I falling apart? He remained silent. Not a nod, not a gesture, only the weight of his presence. The answer again was implied, as if my own failing body and these walks were connected in ways I could not fully comprehend. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain out of me. My chest ached, my muscles trembled, and my head throbbed, but I understood enough. I walked with him. We moved through the dark plains together. The windless air pressed against me. The ground beneath our feet was cracked and uneven, pulsing faintly with an inner glow. I spoke occasionally, but only to fill the silence, knowing he would not answer. And yet, even without his words, I felt it. The reason, the purpose, the inevitability. Each step with him is shaping me, marking me, preparing me for something I cannot name. I do not want to know yet, but part of me knows I already do. When I awoke, my body felt worse than ever. My nose had bled again. My muscles ached. My vision wavered. And still, I cannot stop. 25. I don't know what day it is anymore. The hours of sunlight blur into one another, and the nights follow the same pattern, slipping past me in shapes I can barely name. At first, I could remember every night clearly, because each one was unique, strange, terrifying in its own way. But now, I have seen all manner of things, horrifying, beautiful, impossible, and the memories overlap like wet paint running together. I am not even sure if this is the 25th night, or if I have been walking longer than that. My body continues to fail me. Each day is heavier, each step slower. My vision flickers constantly, and the hallucinations that haunt me when I am awake have grown sharper, more frequent, more detailed. They are not random anymore. I recognize them for what they are, the fates I have witnessed on the walks. I see glimpses of them everywhere. Faces twisted by pain, bodies suspended in impossible ways, signs of punishments that do not belong to this world. Flayed skin hanging from skeletal frames, limbs bent backward until they snap but never stop. People drowning in shallow pools of water that never stop rising, gasping endlessly as the water fills their mouths, noses, eyes. bound to red-hot iron cages that sear without ever cooling, screaming silently for eternity. Hung by man-sized fish hooks through the neck and dangling with others like wind chimes, swaying with an invisible breeze. Bodies sewn together into grotesque patchwork, forming moving walls of flesh. Limbs twisted into knots that defy anatomy, faces pressed flat against stone as if to memorize their own torment. I have begun to feel something I never expected. I can almost see it. Not in full, not with certainty, but I can glimpse the shape of someone's fate before they reach purgatory. The curve of a spine, the tension in their hands, the way they breathe, it all hints at what awaits. I see it in brief flashes, in moments when the world is quiet and the shadows press closer. It terrifies me more than the walks themselves because it is mine, too, and there is no one to guide me through it. I don't know how much longer I can last like this. My body weakens every day. My nose bleeds without warning, my muscles cramp at the smallest effort, and my mind is fraying at the edges. Yet I still walk. I still follow him, even though I know that the horrors I see are only the beginning, and the ones that await are worse than I can name. Every night brings more. Every night I see more of what lies beyond. I am learning the patterns, the inevitabilities, and with each step, I understand that purgatory is not only a place. It is a truth, and one day it will catch me fully. Opening parenthesis question mark dot closing parenthesis. I can barely remember how long I have been walking. Time stretches thin, bending around me like a fragile pane of glass, and the days and nights are one long, continuous motion of shadow and silence. My body is failing faster now. Every movement makes my head and chest ache. We walked for hours without a word. The ground beneath us was uneven, blackened stone that seemed to pulse faintly with a light of its own. The air pressed close, heavy with the smell of wet iron and ash. Finally, I could not hold back the question. Am I going to die? I asked. Death stopped, which is rare. He does not often pause, but now he did, turning his impossible form toward me. His voice, low and hollow, rolled through the stillness. Perhaps. Someday. I swallowed, my throat dry, and whispered, I imagine it will be soon, with how fast my body is declining. He did not answer. I forced myself to ask another question, even though I could feel the weight of his presence pressing down harder with each word. Do I really see it? Can I see people's fates in the real world, like it feels like I can? For a long moment, he said nothing. The stillness stretched between us, the black stone and shadow pressing against my chest. Then, finally, in a single word that cut through me like ice, he spoke. Yes. The word echoed in my mind, settling deep in a place I cannot reach. My stomach twisted. My hands clenched at my sides. It was not just a confirmation. It was a warning. I wanted to say more, to ask what it meant, but I could not. I swallowed and followed him, each step heavier than the last, the silence now full of an understanding eye. Did not want, yet could not escape. The last night. I do not know how many nights it has been. I do not know if the days even exist anymore. Every moment of my life feels like part of the same endless walk, and the nights have begun to feel like the only reality I can trust. Tonight was different. For the first time, I had a full conversation with death. Not a nod, not a wordless gesture, not a cryptic answer. A conversation. I asked him, again, why this is happening. Why I am being shown all these things, why my body is breaking down, why my mind is fraying with every passing day. He did not answer with words at first. Instead, he pointed ahead. I followed him across cracked black stone that pulsed faintly beneath our feet, until we reached the edge of a pit. It was impossible. The darkness yawned below us like an ocean with no bottom. I could not see the end, and my mind struggled to comprehend the depth. Even the air around it seemed heavier, drawn downward as if the pit were pulling the world into itself. This is what you have been walking towards, Death said. Why? I asked, my voice shaking. You will find out soon, he replied. I stood at the edge of the pit, my chest tight, the blackness below endless. Why did you leave me here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Death turned to me, his impossible form shifting with the depth of darkness and stars within him. For a moment, I felt as if he was looking not at my face, but straight into my eyes, into the core of me. It was your choice to follow, he said, his voice low and certain. I am simply the guide. I swallowed hard, staring down into the void. My legs trembled. The weight of inevitability pressed on me. There was no arguing, no bargaining, only the truth of what I had chosen, knowingly or not, and the path that lay before me. I looked into the unending void, my stomach twisting. What happens if I fall? He tilted his head, a movement that seemed impossibly slow and deliberate. His body radiated nothing but emptiness and stars, a universe contained in black. You will not fall, he said. Because you will step in. I swallowed hard. My hands were trembling. My chest ached. The pull of the pit was stronger than anything I have felt, a pressure that threatened to drag me into itself even before I moved. And yet, I knew he spoke the truth. I would not fall. I would step. I do not know what waits at the bottom. I do not know if I will survive what comes next, or if I will be changed beyond recognition. But I know I will step. And then, perhaps, I will finally understand. Underscore 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 underscore. Even as I write this, I can feel it. My fingers are growing cold with the touch of death, the weight of him pressing into me through the screen, the keyboard, through the air around me. I write not because I think it will save me, not because I can fight what is coming, but because I need someone, anyone, to know. To know that this exists, that it waits, that I have seen it. All day I have seen him. Not in dreams, not in walks through impossible lands, but here, in the waking world. Just out of reach, always near, waiting. I cannot close my eyes without seeing the shadow of him sliding across the corners of rooms, leaning over strangers, brushing past passers-by in silence. It is not that they cannot see him. It is that he does not allow them to see, only me. I have been seeing the fates of others for weeks now. I can glimpse them in the twitch of a hand, the curve of a spine, the way someone breathes, and it chills me to know what waits for them. But when I look at myself, there is nothing I can measure. No form I can define. Only infinite dark. Beautiful, impossible dark filled with swirling infinities of new and dying stars, galaxies of smoke and shadow birthing and dying within themselves. A universe contained in a single absence of light, and it is me. I know tonight I will step into the pit. I know it as surely as I know that the air presses heavier on my chest, that my legs shake beneath me, that my body is failing. This is not a choice. It is inevitability. I do not know what awaits at the bottom, but I know it will be the answer. I know that what comes next will be the culmination of every walk, every sight, every whisper of death in the dark. And still, I am not afraid, not fully. There is a strange comfort in knowing the shape of what is to come, in knowing that I will finally see it. Tonight, I will step. And perhaps, after that, there will be silence. Okay, if you still awake right now, drop comment and let me give you bonus of other story. I found a child drowned in a wheat field. The man smiled, reaching once more for the bottle in front of him. He raised it to his lips, taking a long swig and wiping the foam from the corners of his unkempt mustache before turning once more to me. After half an hour of conversation, it appeared as though something I'd said to the man had finally stirred up some interest. You mentioned a theophany. What's that? The gruff man asked. I reached down to his travel bag and wiped the still fresh dust from its buckles before pulling out a Bible. Yes sir, a theophany. It's not a word strictly associated with Jesus, but we mostly use it to describe times in the Old Testament when it's believed the Lord appeared in a physical form, before he was born in Bethlehem. Are you familiar with the story of Jacob, how he wrestled with God? The man took another sip from his rapidly emptying bottle, nodding wordlessly as he did so. Well, that's a theophany. We know he struggled with a man until morning, when the man revealed himself to be the Lord. Or, an angel of the Lord, anyhow. A lot of scholars believe that mentions the angel of the Lord or Jesus himself anyways. Wade think. I studied his expression for any sign of interest. I had visited towns where hardly a soul could tell the difference between Moses and Noah, but had never yet met a man like the bulky, haggard figure beside me who already seemed not only immensely knowledgeable of scripture, but wholly uninterested. The man shifted in his chair, scratching his roughened chin before calling the bartender over for another beer. After several moments of silence, he spoke once again to me. The original language refers to the man as Elohim, which many translate to mean, Big G, God. Elohim really just means, a god, a heavenly being. I think it was an angel he wrestled with. Not that that ain't impressive, mind you. The man took another sip of beer. What about that the burning bush? I raised an eyebrow. What about it? Well, just a thought, I guess. I met someone a few years back, real smart fella. He told me he believed that when Moses spoke to God through the burning bush, he was talking to Jesus. Same thing when God comforted Elijah on the mountain, that it was Jesus. Well, in a way, yes. We hold Jesus and the Father to be two distinct persons, but both the same God. The man chuckled. No, I mean like they were speaking to Christ himself, after he was born. When Jesus went up on the mountain for the transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appeared with him and they talked to him, right? He thought, maybe, since God is bigger than time, he could be both then and now all at once. His idea was that when they appear in the New Testament, it's the same conversation that he's having with each of them back in the Old Testament too. I furrowed my brow, leaning back into my chair. That's, well, that's a unique thought. I don't know how much water it holds scripturally, but I must say it's creative, at least. The two of us sat in silence for a while, content not to trouble each other any longer with speculation or trivia. It was late into the evening then, and more wearied patrons had begun to stumble into the small bar, tired from a long day's labor. Not long after the last beams of orange sunlight slipped through the shuttered blinds, a small commotion began outside. I heard shouting and the screech of tires, and after a few seconds, the wooden front door burst open with a clatter. A man, disheveled and sweating, took a second to lean against the doorframe. His face was red and glistening, and he was deeply out of breath. After collecting himself, he looked across the room towards two elderly police officers who had been hunched playing cards at a small table. I recognized the elder of the two to be the sheriff, a man named Emerson with whom I'd made acquaintance that afternoon. The red-faced man at the entrance called out to the sheriff and his deputy, the distinct twang of panic caught between his haggard breaths. They found him, Sheriff. The McBride boy, they found him out in the field. The sheriff had already begun to put on his coat, moving quickly towards the exit. I sat in my seat, watching the situation unfold for several moments before realizing that every other person in the small room was also rushing out the door. I turned my head to my burly drinking partner, expecting in him the same urgency, but found instead that the man moved slowly. Beneath his rough skin and unkempt beard, his expression was grim as he paid his tab and trudged out the door in pursuit of the curious mob. I collected my things once more into my dusty travel bag and left the bar, stepping out into the dim moonlight. I looked out across the highway, where the amassing crowd was already tearing through the wheat fields in a frenzy, flashlights in hand as their red-faced messenger led them onwards. Pennell Crossing was incredibly small back then. The township was entirely bisected by its defining interstate highway from which it clung to tightly. Across the highway to the west, where I now faced, were the majority of the local farms. When I had rode into town on the Greyhound bus that morning, I thought that in the blistering sunlight, the fields of wheat and corn seemed infinite in their breadth, stretching out into nothingness. On the eastern side, the small collection of stores, bars, and municipal buildings arranged themselves as almost a perfect row along the side of the highway. Behind them lay several houses and a few small livestock farms, clustered closely to the rest of the infrastructure. Nested neatly in the middle of it all was a small chapel, once well cared for. Those days were evidently long since past, its white paint chipping and its windows cracked and dusted. It had been the decline of this church culminating with the sudden death of the former pastor, that had led to me being sent to Pennell Crossing that very day as the replacement pastor. I spotted the large man slowly making his way across the highway. I hastened my step to catch up, and between panting breaths asked him if he knew the McBride family very well. I didn't, no. I'm about as new around here as you are, just passing through. Oh, that explains why you're so well learned on the word, I reckon there ain't a seminary round here for 500 miles. Pardon me, by the way, I never caught your name. My name is Peter. Never went to preachin' school, Peter. You can call me Nolan. The pair of us crossed the threshold of the wheat fields, the waist high. Stalks of grain trampled under the feet of the crowd preceding us. In the ever-spreading carpet of amber ahead, all sound was muffled amidst the rhythmic rustling of the harvest in the wind. We continued in silence, following the faint lights quickly disappearing ahead further into the fields. Only when the distant wailing of a woman far ahead came to our ears did we quicken our step. When we caught up to the rest, they were clustered frantically around chaotic scene. Ahead, just a few feet, was a large green tractor. It rested at an odd angle, slanted dramatically as though on uneven ground. I looked at its base to find that its back tires lay nearly half submerged in the soil. Oddly, the ground on which it sat lay dry and undisturbed, as though the tires had simply sunken through the solid ground. Its operator, a panicked young man, sat leaning against its dusted metal frame, tears rolling down his tanned face as he spoke between sobbing breaths to the sheriff. I turned my attention away from the tractor to try to see what the crowd circled around. Several men stooped down, struggling to lift the crying woman to her feet. She kept shrugging their arms off, falling back to the ground where she herself seemed to be struggling to pull something out of the soil. As I stepped closer, gently pushing my way through the crowd, I saw the cause of distress, the lifeless body of the McBride child. At initial glance, it appeared as though only the upper half of the boy's body was present. I wondered, with sickening fear, if perhaps the boy had been run over by the tractor. I observed as the woman, whom I would soon learn to be the boy's mother, once again grabbed the child's small arm, trying to lift him up. The realization came that the boy's body, much like the sunken tires of the tractor, was half buried in the soil, with arms and head outstretched as though he had attempted to claw his way out of the dirt. When Mrs. McBride was finally pulled away from her child, Nolan began instructing some of the others to start digging out the boy's body. The red-faced man who had burst into the bar stepped back, eyeing Nolan with curiosity and suspicion before turning to speak to the sheriff. I watched in awe as the boy's body was quickly removed, the soil around his legs collapsing back in on itself as though he had simply displaced the earth. Sheriff Emerson walked up beside me, letting out a heavy sigh as the pair watched. "I hope you'll forgive the chaos round here, Reverend." My eyes didn't leave the unfolding scene, watching as the boy's mother swooped in to cradle her son's body. "What did the farmhand say? How'd this happen? Poor kid got stuck, popped out to take a look and tripped over the boy. Hell of a thing to find. He'll be all right in a few days, though." As Mrs. McBride clung to her child, she hugged his limp body tight, squeezing him. As she did, a sputter of water was pushed out of the boy's lungs, spilling onto the ground. The crowd stepped back in shock as the mother sobbed ever louder. As the last of the water dripped out of the boy's pale lips, my nose curled. In the air, just for a passing moment, a harsh, chemical scent wafted by. It passed nearly as soon as it arrived. Nolan stepped back from the scene, dusting his rough hands off on his coat. I looked at him, and saw inklings of teardrops forming in the creased corners of his eyes. Nolan mouthed something to himself in disbelief, before turning to me and saying it aloud. "He drowned. Dash." The boy's funeral was quiet, even for such a little town. I sat silent in the back row, daring not to interrupt the already painfully awkward service. The child had been the youngest of 6. His siblings and mother sat in the front row, their sniffling echoing through the near empty chapel while their father gave a poorly rehearsed eulogy. I, now technically Pennell Crossing's spiritual leader, had offered to perform the funeral myself. I had been gently declined by the McBride family, who felt the service should be performed by those who had known Benjamin in life, not only in death. Although understanding, I couldn't help but feel the slight sting of rejection from the members of my new congregation. I hoped that these people would soon come to trust me, even amidst the tragedy I emerged into. Within 20 minutes the service was over and the small body was removed to be driven to the burial site, which I also declined to attend to respect the privacy of the mourners. Once the small crowd had tearfully shuffled out, I walked out of the chapel, and prayed silently that my next time attending my new place of work would not be another funeral. I crossed the side road, walking over to the dilapidated motel next door to the bar, in which I'd stayed the last few nights and would likely keep staying in until a more permanent residence was made available. Standing outside the bar were Nolan, Sheriff Emerson, and the red-faced man from the bar. The three of them seemed to be deep in a heated discussion, one that I could tell was only intensifying as he made his approach. "I'm sure you had nothing to do with this, Nolan, but you know the bind I'm in. We try to welcome newcomers like yourself here, but if Clark here saw you out in the fields the night the kid was found, I at least have to bring you in for some questions." Nolan crossed his arms firmly, leaning against the wall as I approached. "I understand that, Emerson, but we can do that right here. As I understand it, you and the deputy are the only officers in town anyways, so what good would it do to bring me into the station? I'll answer any questions you have right here." The red-faced man, Clark, scoffed and turned to protest to the sheriff but was interrupted by me. "'Excuse me for interrupting y'all, but am I understanding there's some suspicion in the death? I can vouch for Nolan the afternoon the body was found, at least. We were in the bar speaking that evening, and before that he'd been sitting at the bar since about noon." Clark turned to me, his brow furrowed in frustration. "He might have been, but I saw him out in those fields the night before that, when the kid went missing. He was just standing out there, a little bit past where the body was found." I looked over to Nolan, who scoffed. "I weren't nowhere near there, Sheriff. I can't prove it to you, but maybe you should start asking Clark why he was also out in the fields when the kid went missing, and why he didn't bring it up until now." Clark slammed a shaking fist against the wall where Nolan leaned. "Because I, unlike you, live here and work these fields like everyone else. It's my livelihood. You, on the other hand, have barely left the bar since you showed up, except to stand out there in the field the night he went missing." Sheriff Emerson pulled Clark back away. "Nolan, you quit that, and calm yourself down. Mr. Carver does bring up a good point. Clark, if you saw him out there that night, why didn't you say anything? It ain't a crime to stand out there. I thought he was a new farmhand. It wasn't until I found out later that he weren't, and that's where the kid was. Had no reason to be suspicious until body was found, Sheriff. I'm telling you, this man's as guilty as sin." I sat back, daring not to interrupt once more as the three men continued to argue. Eventually, after some heavy persuasion and the threat of arrest, Nolan agreed to accompany the elderly sheriff back to the station provided Clark did not come with. This left a visibly angry Clark alone with me, feeling extraordinarily awkward and out of place in the situation. The two of us sat in a tense quiet for several minutes, leaning against the wooden walls of the old bar and watching the amber field sway in the wind across the highway. Finally, I spoke up. "Clark, was it? I don't think we've been officially introduced yet. Name's Peter, I'm the new preacher." "I know who you are." Clark chuckled between gritted teeth. "Ain't no one been here dressed like you since Reverend John died back in May." "Ah, well, I'm sorry to have come in the middle of such a troubling time. The death of a child, especially in the way it went, ain't ever easy." Clark's expression softened a bit. "'S'alright, Peter. It ain't nothing new round here, if I'm honest. Shit happens all the time. Livestock dies, folks die, kids die too. Just the way it goes, I guess." I raised an eyebrow, turning to face him. "This happens often." Clark stiffened, looking uncomfortable. "Well, it's not always that bad, but yeah. Folks out here are pretty used to losing people, and not always getting the answers they're wanting. Your buddy though, Nolan, he's hiding something. Maybe not that he's a killer, but something. If that something could get the McBride family some of the answers they're hurting for, good." I sat back, thinking for a moment. I wouldn't call him my buddy, you know. I met the man just a few days ago. Clark turned, stepping away from the wall and walking into the bar. "Well, then maybe you should be a bit more careful who you vouch for." The next few days were well spent trying to restore the small chapel to some resemblance of a holy place. It was difficult to believe that the decay had crept in so rapidly in the short few months since Reverend John's death. Likely, the paint had been peeling for years, the dust collecting in corners unswept for far too long. I made my best effort to clean every nook and cranny I could get to in the sanctuary before I would bother trying to find the lost key to the back office. It was the sanctuary, after all, where I'd hoped to reunite the congregation of Pennell Crossing in worship. I dusted the window sills, straightened the hymnals in the backs of the pews, and swapped broken light bulbs for new ones. By Friday, the small room was finally in a state that I considered worthy of its purpose. By happenstance, a visitor came to the chapel that same evening. The woman, dressed in a pale blue dress and holding a toddler to her hip, walked through the door while I was collecting my personal effects to begin settling into the back office. I stood up to meet her, holding an outstretched hand to shake her own. The woman looked apprehensively at my hand for a moment, as though debating whether to shake it or not. She shook her head as though clearing some unwanted thought before relinquishing a small smile and introducing herself. "You must be Peter. I'm sorry we haven't had the chance to be introduced yet. I'm Ellen, and this is my son Micah." I smiled back. "It's a pleasure to meet you both, ma'am. I'm just getting things ready for the Sunday service. I wish I'd had the time to clean it up more before the funeral, but in the state it was in." I trailed off, noticing a visual discomfort growing in Ellen's face. "I'm sorry, I'm sure you don't want to hear about the mess or the funeral. What brings you in here today?" Her creased cheeks softened once more, and she used her free hand to fish a set of keys out of her handbag. "I take it you haven't opened the back office yet, but you'll need these to get in, it'll still be locked." I forgot Emerson had them. I hesitantly took the rusted key ring from her hand. "Well, thank you, miss. If you don't mind me asking, why'd Emerson have them?" Her face scrunched with confusion. "Because of the crime scene." "Crime scene? What crime scene?" Her eyes went wide. No one told you." She reached out her arm, indicating she wanted the keys. I handed them back, and followed her as she led him into the short corridor behind the pulpit leading to the preacher's office. She set Micah down on the warped wooden floor for a moment while she fidgeted with the key, struggling to fit it into the rusted keyhole. Finally, as the lock clicked open, she picked up her son once more. I don't want to go back in there. I'm so sorry they didn't tell you yet. I'm sure Emerson can help you clean up if anything, if there's still some mess left. Goodbye, Pastor." With another uncomfortable smile, Ellen left the small chapel, leaving me with the keys and the burning fusion of curiosity and terror for what I'd find on the other side. After a short prayer, I pulled open the creaking door, met by torn police tape hastily strewn across the threshold. As I ducked underneath, the strong smell of iron stung his nose. I looked around at the cluttered office, and was taken aback by the sight before me. By all accounts, most of the room was as one would expect for a small-town pastor. Dusted bookshelves lined the walls, completely filled with all manner of different biblical translations and theological texts. A desk stood in the center of the room, still cluttered with planners, papers, and pens. In the middle of the room, however, was evidently the crime scene that Ellen had spoken about. A crater had formed in the middle of the floorboards, a hole of warped and charred wood as though something had ruptured from beneath the floor. Shards of wood littered the whole of the office, many of which burnt and splintered, some even lodged into the ceiling above. Caked onto the front of the desk, floor, and ceiling alike near the center of the room, was a substantial splattering of dried blood. I stepped around the hole, my puzzled mind racing for any explanation. The only one I could muster, the one that I feared the most, lodged itself firmly in my brain as I made my way around the back side of the desk. An attack, a small-scale bombing directed at the previous pastor. I allowed himself one minor sin and swore under my breath, cursing my superiors for intentionally keeping these details from me so as not to scare me away from the position. As I looked over Pastor John's desk, I scanned the various documents. Many of them were obituaries, invitations to funerals from months prior. Clark had been right, it seemed death was a common happening in Pennell Crossing. I had been looking at the documents for several minutes before the picture on the desk caught my eye. The small framed photo, placed at the corner of the desk, seemed to be a photo of Pastor John, with his family. Clinging to his leg was a small toddler and at his other side was a loving wife, both of whom I recognized. I swore once more, frustrated at myself for not realizing earlier that Ellen and Micah were Pastor John's wife and son. Okay, if you love this bonus story, let me know in the comment section.
Thank you for spending your night with me. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. And if you want more rain-soaked nightmares, check out the next video. Sleep tight, if you can.